Well, hi there! Did you guys like that new intro? I made it myself. I just recently added Premiere to my Creative Cloud subscription, so I've been playing around with that a little bit, and that intro is kind of a result of me dipping my toes into the cold waters of video editing for the first time. Or at least the kind of video editing that goes a bit beyond just speeding up some footage and talking over it. So I'm thinking that intro could be like a fun little project. Like as I learn more and more about Premiere, I can add more and more things to it. Like I kind of want to have some sort of like sound to it, or like a little bit of like a musical thing to it or something, but I have like no idea. I'm not a musical person at all, so I have no idea how I would go about doing anything like that. But I figure like as I figure it out and learn more and more, I could just add things to it, and it would be kind of interesting to see how it develops over time. Yeah, that's a great idea. The intro can be like this channel's version of a Chia Pet. But anyways, moving forward with the actual process video that I'm bringing to you today, we're doing something a little bit different than the recent things that I've done in the past here. This project is a bit more involved and a bit more complex than the things that I've been recording and commentating thus far. Essentially, it's a fully fleshed out and fully rendered digitally painted illustration that a client hired me to, or commissioned me to do for, they wanted to use it for the cover of a book series that they were working on writing. They're an author. And yeah, the composition of this scene that we're illustrating for this cover is pretty complex. There's, I think, 6 characters total, right? Yeah, 6. As well as a fairly in-depth and pretty complex background. There's a whole lot oh, no, 7 characters. I forgot about the little cricket fella in the bottom. But yeah, since this is such a large and complicated piece, I was thinking that we could make things like this sort of very large scale sort of projects into a bit of a series of their own. There's no way that I could get all of the footage that I recorded for this project into one video. I think I've been trying to keep them around 15 minutes thus far when I've been commentating them. There's just no way like I could compress this much footage into one 15-minute or so video without speeding it up to the point where it's just impossible to talk over, and it's pretty incomprehensible as to like what's even going on from the viewer's perspective, because everything's just happening so quickly and so fast, and it's just, you know, all over the place. So instead of trying to condense all of these hours and hours and hours of footage down into one single 15-minute video, I figured it would be a better idea to just break it up into multiple 15-minute segments until we finish with the project. That way I can kind of keep the speed of the time-lapse down, so it's a lot easier to tell what's actually going on, and I can kind of keep up with the pace of the video with what I'm saying. And we can kind of make it into like a series, which would be pretty fun. So I'm thinking that's going to be the plan, and that's what we're going to do for larger projects that take a lot of time and are developed to a very high level of detail with a lot going on in them. And with that said, I should probably get around to doing the actual commentary for this video. So while I've been talking, I've just been kind of like letting the sketching process run here in the background. There's not like a whole lot to say about it. I'm just essentially sketching out the positions and rough poses of the characters here according to what the client was looking for in their initial brief that they provided me with. Essentially the 4... I can count, right? Yes, 4, right? Wait, zoom out. Turn those layers on. How many freaking kids are on this canvas right now? Pretty sure there's 4 kids. Anyways, those 4 kids are the main characters of this author's book series, and like I said, he was intending to write a series of books that were aimed at a younger demographic, and the sort of idea behind the books was that they were supposed to be educational, fictional stories about this group of kids who gain the power to, I think, travel through time, and their main goal is to stop the villain of this universe, or the story, from also going back in time and basically rewriting history through manipulating and directly affecting the outcome of historical events, if that makes any sense. So for example, in this case, for this cover, the scene is based around these 4 kids, the main characters, who have, in this story, gone back in time to the 1800s? I think it's 1800s. I'm pretty sure that's when Charles Darwin was kicking around, right? My history is like really, really bad, so I might be wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong, please, in the YouTube comments. I know you guys love doing that. But anyways, in this case, they've gone back in time because the villain of the story, who is the sinister fellow in the robes who's hovering over the side of the ship currently over the waves and stuff, he's come back in time to this time period, and he wants to do, you know what, I don't think I was ever clear on what he was doing in this story. He's like here to just like jump Darwin, I guess, or like give him the willies or drag him under the bed or whatever he wants to do to him, I'm not sure. But he wants to do something bad to him. And our heroes, these 4 main characters, are here to stop that from happening, basically. So that's why they're all kind of standing protectively around this figure in a naval uniform and everything here that's supposed to be a young Charles Darwin. And they're here on this ship that he sailed on in 1800, whenever. You know what? When did he do it? Let's find out. Okay, so apparently this was in 1831, and the ship is called the Beagle. Oh, fuck me. Okay, so they're here on the Beagle with Charles Darwin, trying to protect him from the villain man, who I'm just going to call Hoodie from now on, because that's the most prominent feature of him, is his large, imposing hood. So in the initial brief, I was required to have all of these characters in sort of a confrontation with the villain on board the ship, and the illustration needed to convey like a ton of emotion, and it needed to be really evident that the seas were very rough, so the client wanted to see like a lot of waves in the background, and he just wanted it to be like a pretty dynamic composition all around. They were also very interested in having the kids all in extremely heroic poses, like they're all like raring to just like fight this scary floating man. And they also, or the client also, informed me that this would be the first book in the series, and that in the context of this scene within the story, this was supposedly the first time that this team of heroes has used their time traveling powers. And from what he described about the scene, it sounded like it was a pretty, the context of them traveling through time when it happened was like fairly unexpected. So I was thinking, you know, maybe having all of them in super heroic poses or whatever wouldn't be the best idea, considering they're still like pretty young kids, and with the context of this whole experience being like really, really unexpected to them, I figured like they would be more like terrified than anything at this point, I guess, because suddenly they're in like the 1800s on board this ship. I think he was saying the scene that they traveled from was like they were just playing in their backyard or something. So I was of the opinion that they should be somewhat like afraid looking, or like apprehensive, or scared, and the client ended up agreeing with me. So it definitely pays to work with the material that you're given, and also don't be afraid to make decisions or suggestions that go against what your client initially asks you for, I guess, because a lot of the time they'll end up liking what you suggest or what you show them more than what they had in their minds initially, as long as your changes serve to better flesh out the characters that they've written. On the other hand, also listen to all of the suggestions that your client makes to you throughout the sketching process. So, for instance, right now what I'm doing is I've had to redraw and restructure the poses of some of the characters fairly heavily. It's just the sketching stage, so it's not like a whole lot of work, but I did end up having to redo a few of these poses because the client pointed out to me that all of the characters, like our main characters, and giving way too much attention to the villain by not having their faces visible. This illustration isn't supposed to be about the villain. The characters needed to be featured pretty prominently, so I messed up by not doing that to begin with, and luckily the client recognized that and saved it. But from what I remember, this guy was like pretty good to work with. There was a lot of back and forth and a lot of sharing of ideas and changes from both sides, so pretty much the ideal kind of client that I personally like to work with a lot, and that I think most illustrators like to work with. So yeah, I mean, I guess that's the gist of what's going on here. I'm just making the corrections to these characters at the moment and doing a little bit more work, like fleshing out their outfits and everything. Now that the poses are pretty much decided on. So I'm trying to think of what else there is to talk about that I haven't mentioned already. Oh, okay, so I mentioned that the client wanted a lot of like motion to be evident in this scene, and they wanted it to be pretty dynamic. So whenever you're making a composition and those are your goals, you want motion, and you want like dynamic angles, and you want things to look like they're moving. A pretty good starting point to accomplish that is by just like putting things on a tilt. So you just put your horizon line at an angle essentially and just allow everything to fall in line with that. So here the deck of the ship is kind of serving as our the deck of the ship and the angle of the wave in the background are kind of serving as our horizon lines, and they're following a slanted horizon line. So that throws everything in the picture on a tilt, and as a result makes everything look like it's either moving really fast or everything's like really like chaotic and just kind of all over the place. If you were to take this whole canvas right now and kind of flip it, just rotate it to the point where the horizon line was straight, the scene would lose, I guarantee you the scene would lose like just a ton of tension that it has, that is created purely through that angle. So that's something that I really like to do right at the start in scenes involving any sort of like confrontation or battling or fighting or whatever. So it's kind of like if you leave it straight, it'll be static, and if you slant it, it'll be super cool. So I'm getting to the point here now where we've got all of these poses mostly edited and everything, and I'm cleaning them up at this point and sort of finalizing this initial sketch here and getting it ready to show to the client for their approval. So I'll probably go ahead and leave this first video off here. I mostly just wanted to show the initial sketching process while I explain sort of how these types of videos were going to be structured, I guess. So when we reconvene in part 2, that will be the beginning of the actual painting process, and we'll start in with that background first. So if you want to see some blue waves get painted, be sure to stay tuned for that one. I'm going to go ahead and say bye-bye for now. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.